Hi there, my name's Phil Binks. Ecamm Live recently added their version 4 of the software, and this introduced a new feature called the camera switcher. And if you were used to Ecamm in the past, you would normally have been using your scene selector to switch from one camera to another. So it's of great interest if you've got a production that uses multiple cameras. So let's go straight into demo mode and I'll show you what we can do. So here we are in demo mode. Hello there. And what we've got is the normal window here. And I've just got one camera facing me, which is this main camera. It's a Sony ZV-E10. And I've got in the new camera switcher just here, I have a single feed of one camera. Now I've got some scenes over here. I've got two scenes only. I've got the base scene, which is just this one scene, and I've got one called an outro, but we won't worry about the outro too much at the moment. What we're going to do is build some scenes and show you the differences between what we can do with the camera switcher. So the camera switcher could potentially have no cameras in it at all. If I go here and say remove from switcher, then the camera switcher doesn't have a camera in it, but you can still see me and it is still working. If I want to add a camera to the switcher, I can go to this icon here at the bottom of the window, click on that, and I can then add a number of different camera options, and I've got several cameras connected here. So the Camlink 4K is the one that's connected to my Sony camera, so if I click on it, that will add it immediately. So that is now showing in, let's call it scene 1. I should be able to click on this zoom button and that will liven that up. It's only the one camera, so there's nothing showing up in the drop down box in this area here. If I had green screen, I'd be able to use that as well. But what I can do is zoom in and zoom out, so you can see that quite easily. Let's copy the scene, and the way that we do that easily is we hold down the Alt key on the keyboard and we drag down, and that's made a copy of scene 1. And what I'm going to do is call it scene 2, and you see I can simply just type that in right there. So scene 1 and scene 2 are exactly the same, but if I've got scene 2 selected and I now zoom in, and we'll zoom in quite closely, let's say, it's quite easy to see that if I switch back to scene 1, and I'll do that by clicking on the scene icon, that I go back out to the original standard view. If I want to go to scene 2, which is zoomed in, I click on that and that will move me to the closer scene. So I'll go back to scene 1. So we can see how different scenes can have a single camera feed and then multiple zoom areas. And the great thing is that if I create another copy, so I'll just do the same thing, Alt drag, and we'll call that scene 3, and we'll click on scene 3, and then what I can do in the zoom and pan windows is I can move around that area, so maybe I can zoom in on the light just behind me. So I've now got a situation where scene 1 shows me as normal in the full screen. I can click on the second scene, which is zoomed in to me a little bit, and then scene 3, which is a different view using the same camera. So all of these 3 scenes show the same camera. So that's the only place that you see a single camera, but it's great because it allows you to choose and select multiple areas in an image and effectively zoom in, and so it looks like you might have multiple cameras connected when you've really only got one, hopefully a high resolution camera like this. This is where a 4K camera really comes into its own. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add another camera into the mix. So the way I can do that is I can go down to the bottom here. There's several ways, but I'm going to go down in the camera switcher window with all sources selected and click on here, and I'll add in my iPhone which is running through NDI, and that's going to be looking up my nose a little bit. So here we are, and I say hello. This is another view of me that you can see in my camera number 2. So with camera number 2, I can click it, and even though I'm in scene number 1, it makes it very easy for me in the camera switcher to click and move from one camera to the other, as you can see. And I'm always in the same single scene. Okay, but what I can also do is create a new scene, so I can click on the plus button. Let's drag that into a better position, and I'll call it scene 4. And I need to make sure that the source is seen as a camera source. So here we are. So I'm back here and I'm on scene 4 at the moment. Okay. So if I now switch back to scene 1, my scene 1 is on the other camera, which is my Sony camera. The same as is on scene 2 or scene 3. Now I can switch between these scenes with the up and down arrows on the keyboard. So if I want to move from scene 1 to scene 2, I just hit the down arrow to press return for it to actually take effect. So I press down and return, and that will move me onto scene 3. Down and return will move me onto this camera, which is scene 4. Okay, I could actually go into this area here on the screen. Let me see if I can zoom into it for you. Scene 1, I can click on this button and it says type a hotkey. So typing in a hotkey, I can hit and hold Command and 1, and that makes scene 1 Command 1 on my keyboard. I can do the same here and do Command 2, or I could do 1 and 2 or 3. All sorts of combinations are available, but you have to be a little bit careful to make sure that those combinations are available to you. So it's very simple. You just click on the icon and it says type a hotkey, and that will become the hotkey that will then switch you to that particular scene. So let's go back to scene 1, or I could have done Command 1 to get that back there. So you can see the difference is that now I've got a scene assigned to a particular camera in this situation, but it's only assigned to that camera so long as I don't highlight the camera in the camera switcher. As soon as I do that, and the new camera is then part of that scene. So you have to be a little bit careful with your camera switching if you are using scenes to move from one camera to another. So I will now move back to that main camera that I'm on now. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll add in another scene where we're using the iPhone camera, the one which is down here. So let me add another one here, and that's a way of Alt, drag, let go, copy a scene, and we'll make it scene 5. Highlight it, so it's the same view as we had before for scene 4. But what we'll do now is we'll zoom in. So I go onto the screen here and I go to the zoom and pan button, and we'll zoom in, and I can move it around the screen just here very nicely and easily. So now scene 5 is this zoomed view. Scene 4 is this outer view, and remember the scene 1, 2 and 3 are all on the other camera. All very easy to do. Scene, so if I go to scene 1, I'll do Command 1 and it switches me to that new camera, that keyboard command that we've programmed in there. What we're going to do now is add in another camera. So let's do that. So I can click on the plus button here, and we'll add in this G6 camera, which is an Android camera running a NDI. Is here, and it's jumped into this position here. And the reason it's jumped in there is because it's an alphabetical. C becomes before G, G becomes before P. So it's jumped in the middle in this scenario here. So that is now another camera that we can use. Let's add another scene. So if I click on plus, we'll call it scene 6. And scene 6, again, we'll make sure the source is a camera, and I can select this G6 camera in the camera switcher, and it becomes the picture, the scene. Okay, so just to be very clear with you, I'll zoom in. If you want to switch from one to another using your mouse, then you have to click in the actual icon, and that will move you to the next scene camera. If you click on the words of scene, it will just allow you to change the name. So clicking the name doesn't move the camera, it's clicking the icon that does. Okay, let's move back to there. Just make sure your scenes are correct for the camera that you want. Now, the thing is that you could, in a situation, decide that you only want to switch cameras using the camera switcher. So let's have a look at how that might work for you, doing the same thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stick on scene number 1. And we've already seen that if I use the camera switcher, we can switch hello, or we can switch to the hands and the keyboard camera. Let's go back there. So we're in this situation, we are sticking on scene 1. So in scene 1, I can easily switch from one camera to the other simply by going in the camera switcher in the all sources area and just move from one camera to the other. However, at the moment, I can't move to another camera which is zoomed in just using a single scene. I'd have to go to this AB switcher. You can either go to the AB switcher here, or you can go down to the bottom and add a placeholder camera, or I can automatically select camera A or B. If you go straight to adding a placeholder camera, it will actually designate it as camera C. So let's go into camera A. And now in this window, we can select which camera we want to be camera A. So I'm going to select the Ecamm link, which is this camera that we're already using. I can then add another camera B here, select the camera. Let's make that the iPhone camera, which is this one here, hello. And then let's add an additional placeholder camera, which is now going to be here, C, and I can select which camera I want it to be, and it's going to be the G6 here through NDI. Okay, so I've now got 3 different cameras which are designated camera A, camera B, and camera C. But that's not the only thing you can do with the AB switcher. You can make a copy of that camera and zoom in. So let's pretend that we have no more scenes that we want for the time being. We're always on scene 1. So if I go here, I can select that camera B is still the Camlink 4K. So I've got 2 copies of the same image, but with this camera selected, I can then go into the camera effects window just here. It says camera B is selected. It's camera B that I want to change. And I can then choose to zoom or pan using that camera. So let's zoom into that corner. All of the time I'm on one single scene. So let's do this once more with camera C. If I select it, camera C comes into the play here in the camera effects window. I can zoom and pan. Let's zoom in and we'll show that top corner of the screen, the picture in the background. Okay. So I'm in scene 1 and I can go from here and very simply select which of the camera views I want, whether it's A, B or C. And I can do that either by clicking in the camera switcher window. Remember, I'm on the A/B side here. So I can go to B, or I can go to C and back again. Okay. And we get this white box showing which one is actually working. Remember, only one scene is being used here. So you can select different zoom levels in this situation. Now, rather than confusing you too much with that, if I go back to all sources, I've still got all of the sources available to me on this side as well. So I can choose my keyboard, or I can choose something else. Now, one of the great things about the A/B switcher is that camera A, B and C are automatically designated a letter of the alphabet within the software. You can see that by going to the camera setting over here and going camera A, B or C, have A, B and C designated to them as letters. So you can very easily switch between the two by tapping camera B, for instance, will move me to this scene. And if I hit the C key on the keyboard, it will move me to that scene. Of course, one of the great things is that if I go to my numpad control and I simply program A, B and C to the buttons on the numpad software, I can switch from A to B to C, and you can see it in this window how I can very easily switch from one to the other doing that. So that makes it really nice and easy to do. Let's go back to the A/B switcher. Remember, we're always in this situation on a single scene. One of the other effects of working with a single scene is that you are then fixed to that scene's transition. And what do I mean by that? Well, if I move to the next scene, so I'll just hit B, that transition, that slightly slow, delayed, smooth transition is built into Ecamm as a default, but there are a number of transitions that you can choose. So let's say that that transition is built into scene 1. I'm going to now go to scene 2. So I'm moving up to scene 2 here. Okay, so I'm on scene 2. And let's make sure that's camera A. So I've hit the A button in the keyboard. We can change the transition for each scene. We cannot change the transition for a camera. So if you want different transitions to be used throughout your production, you need to make sure you're using scenes with those transitions attached to them. So now that I'm highlighted into scene 2, I'll just zoom in to make it easier. Under the options button, there's a transition, and currently it's in default. But just to make it obvious, let's make the transition a white flash. So now when I move away from scene 2 to scene 1, there will be a transition which will be a flash. So let me just go Command 1, and you saw that flash. So if I now transition to another scene, which will be scene 1, so I'll go Command 1, you'll see it flash. So Command 1, and there's this flash built in, and that's built into the scene. So we're now back in demo mode. Scene 1 doesn't have that transition. So if I move to scene 1, going back to camera B is a smooth transition. Watch this. So it's a smooth transition, no flash. Smooth transition, no flash. Smooth transition, back to here, all of a smooth transition, because they are all part of scene 1's transition option, which is the default. Scene 2 has a transition option of a white flash. So my recommendation is that if you are happy with a single transition. That transition would then be connected to the particular scene. I'm on scene 4. If I select a transition style, let's say it is ripple, as long as I'm on scene 4, that transition will always work whether or not I'm moving from one camera or another in the camera switcher. Even if I switch to the same camera, if I click in the camera switcher, I'm on camera A and I click on it, you get that wobble each time I click on it. So let's say I was selecting a different zoom level and go to this one, C, to select a different zoom level. Then each time I move from one zoom level to another, I'll always have that ripple transition effect that I selected here. And that's baked hard into the scene itself. So then scene 2, if I go to that and then I move, we get the flash version. And if I go to scene 1, then we go simply from one smooth transition to another. If I go to the all sources, then the scene transition is the one that counts. So it's a smooth transition. And if I go to scene 2, it's here and I get the flashes. If I go to scene 4, which was the ripple, that's the ripple effect, even in the all sources camera switcher. Now, one other thing I want to show you is that in the main window, which we have here, is the camera switcher as well. So this mimics the camera switcher I have on the left. If you don't want to have this, you can go into the preferences. So go to Ecamm, preferences, and in the first window under general, you can turn off the show camera switcher in the main window. So I normally turn that off, and that's now not at there. I'm using just the camera switcher, which is here. Okay, if I add a placeholder camera, that becomes camera D. I can select whichever one of the linked cameras I want. So I'll go for the G6, the keyboard camera, just here, and I can switch to that. Okay, so I've got zoom levels, or I can go back to the main screen level here. If I want to add another one, I can go placeholder camera. This happens to be E, obviously, and I'll go back to my iPhone 11 right down here. So it's very easy under a single scene to move from one camera to another, and I can hit E and I've been moving back down to this camera, or I could hit A and move back up to this camera, or I could hit D, which is the keyboard camera, and I can wave to you just here. So I hope that's clear to you. There's a lot to consider there. So we've got scenes which are independent of the cameras in the camera switcher. In all sources, I can only add another connected camera. If I add a placeholder camera, that switches to me to the AB section, and I can have multiple versions of that camera, including cameras that are zoomed in, but that only counts for the single scene that you are on. And that single scene also governs the transition that you have assigned to that scene. I hope you found that useful. If you have, subscribe to the channel and I'll be providing more guidance videos as we go along in the future. Thanks for watching.